You know, life has a cruel way of testing you when you least expect it. One moment, you're raising a child, teaching him to walk, protecting him from every fall. And then, one day, that same child looks at you as if you're the burden. That's exactly what happened to me. I'm not a bitter man by nature. I've always believed that what you give to the world comes back to you, maybe not the same way, but somehow it does. I raised my son David with every ounce of love I had. His mother passed away when he was just 10, and from that day on, my life revolved around him. Everything I did, every late shift, every meal skipped, every dream delayed, it was all for him. David was a bright kid. Smart, funny, full of life. I used to think maybe I did something right. He grew up, went to college on a scholarship, and got a decent job in the city. He got married to a woman named Lisa, polished, confident, and always looking like she had somewhere better to be. At first, I was happy for him. Every parent dreams of seeing their child settled. But soon, the calls stopped coming. The visits got shorter. And then one day, they just stopped. I remember the last time he came by the house. It was a rainy evening. The roof had been leaking for weeks, and my arthritis had gotten worse. I was sitting by the window when I saw his car pull up. For a moment, my heart lifted. I thought he came to check on me. But when he walked in, his face was cold. "Dad," he said, not even sitting down, "I think it's time we talk about arrangements." I didn't understand at first. "Arrangements?" I asked. He sighed. "Yeah, you're getting older, and you shouldn't be living alone. Lisa and I think it's best for you to move somewhere you can get help. You know, proper care." Those words hit me harder than any storm. I stared at him, trying to find my son. The boy who once cried when he scraped his knee, the boy who used to hug me before bed. But all I saw was a man who couldn't wait to wash his hands of me. "I'm fine here," I said softly. "I don't need help." He looked at me the way people look at something broken. "Dad, this house is falling apart. You can't take care of yourself anymore." And just like that, the decision was made, not by me, but for me. A week later, he dropped me off at Sunny Grove Retirement Home. The name sounded cheerful, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt the weight of abandonment pressed down on my chest. The walls were painted beige, the kind of color that tries to hide sadness, but never really can. People sat in wheelchairs staring out of windows or at TV screens that nobody was really watching. The air smelled of disinfectant and loneliness. David didn't stay long that day. He said he had work to get back to. He promised to visit on weekends. But weekends turned into months, and months into silence. The days blurred together. Mornings started with pills, afternoons with bland food, and evenings with a quiet hum of regret. I'd sit on the porch, watching families come to visit other residents. Sometimes their laughter would echo down the hall, and I'd close my eyes, pretending one of those voices belonged to my son. But here's the thing about pain. It either breaks you or it builds you. And I decided mine was going to build me. There was a man named Harold in the home, a retired banker. Sharp mind, but no family left. We became friends over morning coffee. He told me stories about his investments, how he turned small amounts into fortunes. At first, I just listened, not because I cared about money anymore, but because it distracted me from the ache inside. Then one day he said, "You know, it's never too late to start over." That line stuck with me. See, I had some savings. Not much, but enough to breathe. Over time, I started learning from Harold. We'd spend hours going over small business ideas, property auctions, and ways to multiply what little I had left. I'd forgotten what it felt like to feel alive. Until then, within a year, I made my first investment, an old farmhouse on the edge of town that everyone thought was worthless. But I saw potential. With a little help from a few kind workers from the retirement home, and a few favors called in from old friends, we renovated it bit by bit. The staff used to joke that I was the busiest man in Sunny Grove. They weren't wrong. I had purpose again. Years passed. While others waited for visitors who never came, I built something new. The farmhouse turned into a small community center, a safe place for other elderly folks who had nowhere to go. I named it Hope Haven, and funny enough, it grew. Donations started coming in. Local media did a story about the old man who built a home for the forgotten. Then, one morning, after almost 7 years of silence, I got a call. The voice on the other end was shaky. Dad? It was David. My heart skipped a beat, but my tone stayed calm. David, been a while, he hesitated. Yeah, listen, things have been rough. Lisa left, took the kids. The company's downsizing, and I might lose my job. I listened quietly. The man who once abandoned me was now lost. I felt pity, not anger, not revenge. Yet, he asked if he could come visit, maybe even stay for a while. I said yes, but what he didn't know was that his visit would change everything, because I had prepared something, not out of hate, but out of justice. Something that would make him remember what it means to value what you once threw away. David arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I remember it clearly because the sun was low, and the golden light fell across the porch of Hope Haven, glinting off the sign that said, "Founded by George Miller, a place for those never to be forgotten." When he stepped out of the car, I almost didn't recognize him. His face had lines that didn't come from age. They came from regret, failure, and sleepless nights. The confident young man I once knew now stood before me with slumped shoulders and a hollow look in his eyes. "Dad," he said quietly, almost ashamed to meet my gaze. "David," I replied, keeping my tone calm, neutral. "You look tired," he nodded, forcing a faint smile. "It's been rough." I didn't know where else to go. I gestured for him to come inside. "You're always welcome here." As he looked around, his eyes widened. "You built this?" "Yes," I said, pride slipping into my voice despite my effort to hide it. "It's a home for people like me, people who were forgotten by their families, but still had something left to give." He stayed silent for a moment. Maybe the irony stung him. It should have. I led him to the guest room. It was simple but warm, far more comfort than what I had when he left me at Sunny Grove. Later that night, over dinner, he finally opened up. "Lisa took the kids," he said, voice shaking. "She said I was a failure. I lost the house. The company's cutting back, and I might be next." I stirred my soup slowly. "I see." He looked at me, desperate for sympathy. "Dad, I don't know what to do. Everything I worked for just fell apart." There was a long silence. Then I said softly, "Now you know how it feels. When the world turns its back on you." He looked up sharply. "But I wasn't angry. I was just telling the truth." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was young, stupid. Lisa said the home was the best thing for you, and I believed her." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "And did she ever visit me there?" He looked down. No, the truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. That night, I didn't sleep much. I thought about all those lonely evenings at Sunny Grove, how I'd sat under the flickering hallway light, wondering what I'd done wrong as a father. And now, fate had brought him back to me, not as the successful son I'd raised, but as a man broken by the same neglect he once showed me. But I wasn't going to punish him with anger. No, I had something else in mind. Something that would make him understand the weight of abandonment forever. The next morning, I told him, "If you're staying here, you'll have to work like everyone else." He looked surprised. "Work? Here?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Hope Haven doesn't run on pity. Everyone contributes, staff, residents, even guests. We serve meals, clean rooms, tend to the gardens. You'll start by helping in the kitchen." At first he hesitated, but hunger and desperation have a way of humbling even the proudest souls. Over the next few weeks, I watched him struggle. The same man who once drove a luxury car now scrubbed dishes and carried groceries for the residents. He worked quietly, never complained, but I could see shame burning in his eyes every time someone called him son of Mr. Miller. Sometimes he'd sit outside after dinner, staring at the sign of Hope Haven. I knew what he was thinking, that he'd left me in a cold, sterile old-age home, and I had turned that pain into something beautiful. And then one day, opportunity knocked, quite literally. A young journalist came to interview me for a follow-up article on Hope Haven. Her name was Sarah Quinn, and she was bright, confident, and observant. After the interview, she said, "Mr. Miller, your story could be a book, or even a documentary. Have you ever thought about sharing the personal side of it? Why you built this place?" I smiled. "Maybe someday. But I think some stories are best revealed when the time is right." She nodded politely, then turned to David. "You must be proud of your father. David's face turned red. I am. It was the first time I saw him truly break. Tears filled his eyes. That moment, more than any revenge, was justice. Months passed. David began to change. He laughed with the residents, fixed broken chairs, and even helped old Harold with his crossword puzzles. It was as if the arrogance had been washed away, leaving behind the son I once knew. One night, while we were sitting by the fire, he said, "Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness." I looked at him. "Forgiveness isn't earned, son. It's realized." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I reached into a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This," I said to him, "is my will. And inside it, there's something you need to see. But you'll open it only after I'm gone." He looked confused. "Dad, why are you telling me this?" "Because, David," I said softly, "the burden you left me with years ago, it's time I pass it on." His face paled. "Burden?" I smiled faintly. "You'll understand one day." Years passed quietly after that night. Hope Haven grew not just as a place, but as a symbol. It became a haven for the forgotten, the lonely, and those who had once been discarded by the very people they loved. And David, he stayed. He never went back to his city life. He never asked for money or status again. Instead, he managed the home with me, cooking, cleaning, laughing with residents. For the first time in decades, we were father and son again. But there was something between us still, something unsaid. That envelope, he never asked about it, but I knew he thought about it every single day. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the drawer where I kept it. And sometimes I wondered if that quiet curiosity, that subtle fear, was my real revenge all along. Still, as the years went by, my health began to fail. The days got shorter, my breaths heavier, and one crisp autumn evening, I called David into my room. He walked in, his face older, wiser, lined with guilt and redemption. "Sit," I said, smiling weakly. "There's something I need to tell you before it's too late." He sat beside me, silent. "David," I said softly, "do you remember the day you left me at that old age home?" His eyes lowered instantly. "Every day I remember too," I continued. "I remember the smell of disinfectant, the way the clock ticked so slowly on those walls, the faces of people who were waiting to be remembered." I paused. "But do you know what hurt the most?" He shook his head. "It wasn't being alone," I whispered. "It was knowing that my own son had decided I was no longer worth keeping." He tried to speak, but I raised my hand gently. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you this so you understand why I built Hope Haven. I didn't build it out of bitterness, son. I built it to make sure no one else ever felt what I felt." Tears rolled down his cheeks silently. "I know, Dad," he said. "And I'm so sorry," I smiled faintly. "You've shown it, more than words ever could." Then I pointed toward the drawer. "David, it's time." He froze. "The envelope?" I nodded. My hand trembled as he reached inside and took it out. The simple, worn brown envelope with his name written in my shaky handwriting. He looked at me, nervous. "Open it," I whispered. He slowly tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He unfolded it, then his hands began to shake as he read. It said, "To my son, David Miller, when you left me at Sunny Grove, I lost my dignity. When you returned to me years later, I found my peace. But peace, son, isn't the same as closure. The burden you will carry forever is not my anger. It's my legacy. Upon my passing, all assets of Hope Haven, its land, funds, and foundation, will be transferred to your name. But there's one condition. You must live here. You must care for these people until your last breath. You will carry the love I built and the pain I endured as your own. That is the burden of compassion, son. The same one I carried alone. Your father, George Miller." David's tears fell onto the paper. He looked up, eyes full of disbelief and guilt. "Dad, why would you do this?" I smiled weakly. "Because this home isn't a punishment, David. It's your redemption." He broke down completely. "I don't deserve this." "No one does," I said, voice trembling. "But that's the point. We don't get what we deserve, son. We get what we need." He took my hand and held it tight. "I'll take care of them, Dad, I promise." "I know you will," I whispered. "That's the only way to repay a father's love, not through money or success, but through kindness." And for the first time in 20 years, we said nothing. We didn't need to. The silence between us was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. A month later, George Miller passed away quietly in his sleep, surrounded by the residents he had once called his family. At his funeral, the entire village gathered. Many of them had heard of the man who built Hope Haven, the man who turned loneliness into legacy, and, standing at the podium, with trembling hands and teary eyes, David spoke. "My father once told me that love isn't something you say, it's something you build. He built this place from pain, and I intend to continue it with purpose. I was blind once, but now I see what real love looks like." He looked up at the portrait of his father, unsmiling, strong, eternal, and said softly, "Rest easy. Dad, your burden is mine now," years later. When the residents of Hope Haven spoke about George Miller, they would always say, "He left his son the greatest inheritance of all, the weight of compassion." And David, the son who once abandoned his father, would smile and reply, "Yes, and it's the only weight worth carrying forever."